Unfortunately, my book was released to an average response, a far cry from what some had hoped. Honestly, I wasn't really that surprised. My rabid blog and column followers probably accounted for 99% of my sales. Unfortunately, the lackluster sales meant that my career as an author was most likely over before it even began. Then he went on television to call my first chapter a bunch of lies. It was a local reporter from my hometown who asked the questions. Was the story in my book really true? Had he taken my job and stolen my wife and daughter and perpetuated lies about me in court? He could have said nothing. He should have said nothing, but he didn't. In most of the civilized world, the story didn't even cause a ripple. But in my hometown, the son of a wealthy businessman and the ex-wife of an author was a juicy tale. And, whether out of embarrassment or arrogance, he overplayed his hand. He sued me for libel and defamation of character. It was all the publishing company needed. They had spent time and money vetting my book, and had spent even more time and money on editing and design and production and distribution. So when they saw the opportunity to recoup some of their money, they pounced. They dropped an army of high-priced attorneys and public relations staff on my former employer. I watched from the sidelines. It wasn't about him and me. It was about the controversy and the free publicity that came with it. His actions caused quite a stir, and my book shot up the bestseller lists. It's odd how life works. Some people just never learn to quit while they're ahead. Did you know the board asked for his resignation? Nope, I hadn't heard. I am actually stunned he made it this long, though. Productivity dropped 21% after his brilliant cuts that first year, and 18% the next. Sales were down. Morale was down. Your husband was never any good at running things. It didn't surprise me that she didn't jump to his defense. She never would have taken a bullet for me. Why do I think you already knew? Because you are a cold and calculating and heartless woman. It's really too bad, though, because from the papers I just signed for Julie, I think he is going to need that paycheck. That was your lawyer? She's not my anything, and she's not a lawyer. She's a paralegal. She works for the firm that is representing my publisher. I tried to tell you, it's not about me. Although, I am apparently going to benefit a great deal. I guess karma really is a bee. I could see the comeback swirling behind her eyes. There were so many things that she wanted to say and wished she could. And I saw her finally conclude that there was nothing left in her tank, that I would have the upper hand in every scenario. I hoped that she would give me the opportunity to use some of the one-liners that I had been dying to use, but at the same time, I wished she would just go away and leave me in peace. So why are you here? That caught her off guard, but she recovered quickly. Oh, now you're curious? No, I just don't understand what it is that you think you can accomplish. I suppose he should be grateful that you love him so much that you are here trying to save the last bit of his crumbling empire. But like I said, it really isn't up to me. I measured her reaction. It was exactly what I expected. But it isn't him you love, is it? It's his money. Oh, the irony. He had it, but now in the irony of all ironies, he'll have to give it me. And you, once again, will have nothing. What? You don't think you can find another rich sugar daddy to F for money? I think you are selling yourself short. You've still got a hot body. You'll land on your feet. Or, in your case, probably your back. It wasn't like that. I am not sure I had ever laughed so hard in my life. She couldn't possibly think it was different. But her body language was defensive, and her eyes told me she did. I was momentarily taken aback. Could she not know? Was that even possible? Oh, my God. You don't know. What the F is that supposed to mean? I didn't say anything for a while, quickly doing the mental math. But I couldn't find any pitfalls. After months of interviews and depositions and discovery motions, it was all part of the record. If she really didn't know, he had to know she would find out. I wouldn't be hurting the case telling her something that was soon to be public knowledge. You're right. It wasn't like that at all. I am just talking out of turn. It was all innocent. Right. Yes. It was almost a whisper, and I considered asking her to repeat it. But I didn't. Sure. He was just reaching out to the families of his employees, making sure that everyone was aware of the situation at the plant, making sure everyone was preparing for the worst-case scenario. Of course, he was paying special attention to the most vulnerable of the group, the mid-level management. We were the most at risk. and he felt his personal attention was necessary. She was listening with intent, but I had no idea what she was thinking. So he invited you to lunch to give you a heads up. Of course, nothing had been decided yet. It was all just preliminary. And every so often he would give you a call to give you the inside information on how the process of evaluating employees was coming along. Then a few more casual lunches, a few more phone calls, and then he changed his tactics. He poured his heart out. The stress of holding so many lives and the balance of his decisions was just too much to bear. The things he had been offered to save people's jobs were so shocking. Money, favors. It really must have been shocking for Melanie because her eyes were as wide as I had ever seen them. I walked over to my desk as I talked, searching for the right file. When I found it, I continued my narration. And that is when you sealed our fates. That was the moment that he won and I lost. The moment when your trust in me as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a provider lost out to your greed. That is when you gave him your body and destroyed my entire world. I slid the papers across the table. She stared down at them for a while, as if they would burn her fingers if she touched them. I had never actually seen the lists and I always assumed that their existence was a myth. But my publisher's attorneys had combed through thousands of documents revealed during the discovery process. The one she was holding was not all that interesting, except that my name was at the top of the list of employees to keep. According to the dates, it would have been one of the first lists produced, maybe even the first. The second was far more interesting. Sure, the names were the same, but the second list had John Davis's almost incoherent notes, check marks by several names, and my name and one other crossed off with a single red line, mine annotated with one word, Melanie. There was only one other name marked that way. The attorneys couldn't believe he had kept it. Then again, he always was an idiot. The third list was printed on his own letterhead and marked Final, and, not surprisingly, my name no longer appeared. Her eyes darted back and forth in a mental query that I am sure provided an answer that she wouldn't believe. And now you're wondering, how could he possibly know all that? Duh. She was staring back at me, with her mouth slightly open. Dumbfounded was not a good look for her. You'll figure it out. You're stupid, but not that stupid. You know what I mean. The urge for another drink was strong, so I rose from my chair and went into the kitchen. I dropped a few ice cubes in a glass and pushed it into the refrigerator opening to fill it with filtered water. If I had learned anything, it was never to give in to my urges. Decisions made after careful planning and analysis of the potential consequences were more pragmatic. That, and the fact that being drunk in the same room as Melanie seemed to be asking for trouble. I believe that S is one of the most beautiful, natural, wholesome things that money can buy. Steve Martin, since we're just getting everything out in the open, I guess I am curious about something. Did you ever love me? Melanie had been staring at the documents for about 20 minutes. After about 5 minutes, I could see that her grip tightened and her hands were shaking. A few minutes later, her completely stoic expression returned. She hadn't said another word the entire time, so I had decided to break the silence. Apparently, she wasn't interested in answering my question because she moved her head just enough to meet my gaze, and then quickly looked away. I would have been paying closer attention to Melanie, but I just couldn't wrap my brain around why she was sitting in my loft. I definitely had questions and I wanted answers, but I couldn't even go there because her sudden appearance just didn't make any sense. It hadn't even been 48 hours since Mr. Moneypants' lawyers had requested a settlement conference. My attorney and the attorneys for my publisher had thrown a bit of impromptu celebration that night, seeing that move as all but admitting defeat. But in a world ruled by sharks, these guys were the killer whales. They didn't shy away from a fight, they wanted one, went looking for one, and did everything in their power to make sure they found one. Victory wasn't enough. They enjoyed humiliating people. I am certain that none of them had read my book. Everything I wrote spoke against everything they stood for. And yet, it was nice to have them around. Having been on the other side of table, with only righteousness on my side, and getting summarily crushed, had not been a fun experience. So, yeah, I could have easily, and correctly, been labeled a hypocrite, but I hadn't started down this path, so I happily went along for the ride. I was lost in those thoughts when I took another long look at Melanie. She was as beautiful a woman as she had ever been. I smiled at the thought that I had been right all along. I had often told her that she would just get hotter with age. I honestly didn't have any idea why she had gotten all dolled up for me. She looked like she was ready for a night on the town, or more accurately, a night on the prowl, and that's when it hit me. Holy, he sent you here. I am not sure I had ever seen Melanie so angry. In fact, I am not certain I had ever seen her angry at all. When we had been married, even during our worst argument, she had never been angry. Disappointed? Sure. Annoyed? Absolutely. Scared? More than I apparently had known. It was the main reason her betrayal had been so devastating. In an ocean of improbable outcomes, with wave after wave crashing to the shore, in my mind, Melanie abandoning me would have been a continent away. Even now, after years of self-examination and a disciplined and sustained rebuilding of my confidence, I knew I would never be the same. Soulmates never give up on each other. But mine did. Sure, he had to be desperate. The lawsuits and attorney fees totaled $12 million. He was rich, that much was certain, but he wasn't that rich. The Sharks thought, in the end, that Judge would award almost $7 million in judgments. They tried to explain their calculations to me once. My book was called Property and had a valuation, and his lawsuit had been frivolous and without merit, and they had amassed a mountain of evidence to prove that he and his lawyer knew that very fact. It all sounded like the person spewing the better bullshit was going to win. Still, his mistake wouldn't leave him penniless, but it would be damn close. And without a source of income, like the silver platter, cushy job he had been handed before, that outcome would be devastating. It was the only thing that made sense. He had sent her to stop me, in a final attempt to save the only thing that really mattered to him: money. He needed a wife and a family. Melanie looked up, but still didn't respond. I knew for certain that she had no idea what I was talking about. I had to admire his ability to keep her in the dark. I had never been able to hide even the smallest secret from her, mostly because the guilt would have eaten me alive. I guess a conscience wasn't one of John Davis's concerns. A few members of the board of directors started asking him questions. Why didn't he have a family? When was he going to stop with the long list of women and partying? It wasn't that they gave a about him, or the women for that matter, but it had the potential to be problematic for the company. You can't have your next CEO caught up in scandal. It's bad for business. He just flat out asked Stephanie Carmichael to marry him for the money. Of course, she was banging him for cash, so he probably thought she'd just agree. Stephanie was what most people would call or at least that was the rumor around the plant, and her husband David was what I called an ass.